I'm Tom Ganley. I'm a businessman from Northern Ohio, and I'm running for the United States Senate. My first business was named Eastway Rambler, and I started that with about 13 folks and myself, many of which are still with me today, 41 years later. While growing my business, I faced a very, very unusual circumstance. It was suggested, incidentally, by someone that was visiting me. He said, "Hey, you want to buy an Oldsmobile store?" I just left A.D. Palunas Oldsmobile, and he said he wanted to sell it. I said, "Sure, I'll give him a call. I'd love to have that opportunity." So I called Abe Palunas, and we met for lunch shortly thereafter. Then we met for dinner. Then we met for lunch again. And it took about 6 months, but we finally struck a deal, and I bought A.D. Palunas Oldsmobile and renamed it Ganley Oldsmobile in Lakewood. I received in the mail an invoice for $500,000 for services rendered by the gentleman that suggested that I make this phone call. And I thought it was a joke. And he took great offense to that and said, "I expect to pick up a check today for $500,000, or you're going to have the biggest problem you've ever had in your life." Well, about another week or week and a half, I was sitting in my office, and without knocking, the door opened. The gentleman walked in and said, "I'm just the messenger to tell you that you will be killed shortly, and have a good day." And he walked out. And I sat there stunned. I was now in full panic mode, and I called the FBI.
Tom came to us for assistance, and at that time we explained to him that he would have to, in fact, be part of our investigation for us to be able to bring these people to justice.
And they said, "Would you give us permission to put in hidden cameras in all of your offices? Would you give us permission to tap your telephones, to record all the telephone conversations?"
He knew that the only way for this to go away was to put these people in jail, or they would continue to come to him for money, and more money until he had nothing else to give.
The FBI decided to provide money to give to him, but I had to ask certain questions. And I don't know if you can appreciate how upsetting this was. And I said, I don't know if I can remember the questions. And they said, "Well, it's imperative that you ask these questions. It's absolutely imperative." So I took a small sheet of paper and wrote the questions down and set them up on my desk. When he returned, he asked if I had some money for him, and I said, "Yes, I do, but I have to ask you a few questions because I'm confused with this." So then I'd glance over and look at the question, and then I'd ask it. Never picked up on that, and there were 5 or 6 questions, and he answered them all in a very incriminating way, I might add, and he left. And the agents came back in, and I said, "Oh, I'm really glad this is over with now. We've paid him, it's done." And they said, "No, probably not. We think it's just begun."
We realized that this was a lot bigger case and involved a lot higher echelon organized crime people than we first believed.
I was frightened, to tell you very frankly. I was very, very frightened that this would continue. And so we discussed it, and they were very reassuring. And so I continued to wear all the devices. And so I was visited by the same person, Skip, and 2 of his criminal accomplices. And now they decided that there would be a problem with my daughter unless I was willing to pay them some money. And the problem being that they knew that she took lessons at the Brecksville music store. I live in Brecksville. Stop for a second.
There was never a time when I saw fear in Tom Ganley's eyes. The only concern that I ever noted was when Tom talked about his family.
they visited my youngest son in a playground and called me up and said, we just came from your son's elementary school, and we want you to know that he has brown corduroy pants on and sort of a plaid shirt, and when he comes home tonight, ask him.
Those are some of the intimidating things that they did to Tom and to his family to scare him into cooperating with their demands for more money, for cars, and for parts of his business.
My colleagues went everywhere they went. School, football games, band practices, church, everywhere they went.
Every time we thought the case was over, unfortunately for Tom, another new name would come in that we wanted to make a case on. The only way to do that was for Tom to ask to go to the next level. I need to talk to your boss. And for Tom to come up with some of the money and not all of the money.
Started out with one person extorting Tom until a whole entire organized crime family being involved.
It was very dangerous and extremely courageous, and Tom didn't have to do it. Tom did it because he knew it was the right thing to do.
Now this went on, these periodic visits went on for almost 2 years. I mean, this, what I thought was going to be a one-time event turned into a 2-year assignment. Law enforcement documented these events, did a great job, and we were able to secure an indictment.
Once it became known he had cooperated with law enforcement, there was actually a contract out on him and his family.
And that was for $1 million if someone could successfully kill my entire family.
You can imagine what fear that would instill in somebody to find it fear, to know that a organized crime family had put out a contract on him. But he kept going. He refused to let that affect him at all.
Well, I was able to testify against him, and shortly after they played videotapes, it was pretty obvious what was going to happen, so they elected to plead guilty.
They were indicted, they were tried in federal court, they were convicted and sent to prison. And the result of the case was that Tom Ganley participated in it from start to finish, since only he could bring it to fruition, along with our help. And it resulted in the dismantling of an entire organized crime family.
This was one of the most courageous individuals I had ever been associated with.
Under the shadow of the possibility of harm to him and his family, he knew it was that important to bring these individuals to justice.
For him to do that is the reason that he has been given the highest award that a civilian can get from a federal law enforcement agency.
Not only was this the right path, but it was clearly the right thing to do for the rest of society, too. Someone has to step forward. Someone has to be willing to do that. I did it, and I was frightened to do it. I certainly want to make that very clear. I was very frightened to do it, but the comfort that the federal agents brought to myself and my family was extraordinary.
25 years later, he's still a good friend.
I know his children, he knows my children, and it's grown into a personal relationship.
And it's that kind of courage that we need today in an individual to represent us in our federal government.